Daniel Carter had always been a man who carried his past quietly. There were moments when his thoughts wandered back to the days in the Navy, the missions that demanded everything from him, and the calls that always brought tension and fear. But those days were behind him now, or at least he told himself they were. He was a single father, raising his 8-year-old daughter Lily on his own. Every morning he would wake up early, make breakfast, and help her get ready for school before heading off to his modest job at a local hardware store. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and allowed him to keep a roof over their heads. Life hadn't been easy. After leaving the Navy, Daniel thought he could find a normal rhythm, something quiet where his daughter could grow up in peace. But the adjustment was harder than he imagined. Civilian life felt strangely complicated compared to the clarity of orders and missions. The loud chatter of a busy store, the endless paperwork, the constant juggling of schedules, it was exhausting. Yet every day he pushed through it. He didn't have the luxury to falter, not with Lily depending on him. Lily was the bright spot in his life. She had her father's calm eyes and a smile that could melt the hardest of days. She didn't know much about his past, and Daniel preferred to keep it that way. The stories of his time in the Navy were heavy, full of dangers and decisions that would weigh on a child's heart. He wanted her childhood to be filled with laughter, homework, and dreams, not fear or the shadow of war. Still, there were moments when the memories would creep in, uninvited. The sound of a helicopter, a sudden loud bang, or even a night sky filled with the wrong pattern of lights could make his heart race. It was a reaction he couldn't explain, and he couldn't let Lily see it. She needed her father to be steady, dependable, and safe. Most people who saw Daniel in the store or at the park with Lily had no idea about his past. He dressed simply, often in worn jeans and a hoodie, blending into the crowd. He spoke politely, with a reserved tone that gave little away. Customers would ask him questions, and he would answer with patience, never revealing more than necessary. Occasionally, someone would catch a hint of authority in his voice, a calm decisiveness that seemed out of place in the casual environment of the hardware store. But nobody asked too much. It wasn't their business, and Daniel had learned long ago not to volunteer information that could complicate his life. One Saturday morning, Daniel was loading boxes of supplies into a delivery truck when he received a call from an old acquaintance. The voice on the other end was cheerful and almost teasing, reminding him that there was a local event happening that honored veterans. Daniel hesitated. He didn't seek recognition or attention for his service. In fact, he usually avoided situations where his past could become the center of focus. But the voice on the phone insisted, telling him that even one veteran could make a difference to the kids who attended and to the community that wanted to show support. After hanging up, Daniel looked at Lily playing with her building blocks on the kitchen floor. He thought about the stories he had hidden from her, the courage he had never spoken of, the dangers he had faced and survived. Would attending this event matter to her? Would it teach her something about resilience and sacrifice? Or would it just bring a reminder of the life he was desperate to leave behind? He sighed, making the decision to go. It was just one afternoon, and perhaps it would be a chance to step back into the world without the weight of anonymity being entirely lifted when he arrived at the event. Daniel felt a familiar tension in his chest. The gathering was in a large hall with flags draped across the walls, a stage set up for speeches, and tables filled with refreshments. High-ranking officers mingled with veterans of all ages, and families filled the seats, creating a buzz of conversation that reminded him both of camaraderie and chaos. He tried to stay on the outskirts, letting the crowd carry him along rather than drawing attention to himself. He kept Lily close, her small hand gripping his as they navigated the busy room. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, absorbing the sights and sounds. Completely unaware of the depth of history that accompanied her father, as they moved toward the seating area. A few people recognized Daniel immediately. They offered polite nods or subtle smiles, gestures that carried acknowledgement without expectation. Daniel returned them with a quiet nod, grateful for the respect, yet careful not to engage too deeply. He preferred observation over conversation, watching the interactions of officers and civilians alike. It reminded him of missions past, the careful reading of body language, the importance of knowing who is trustworthy. It was instinctive now, a reflex honed over years of training and experience. A short while later, a group of officers entered the hall, their presence commanding attention. Among them was a SEAL Admiral, whose reputation preceded her even in these circles. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to leadership and the responsibility of decisions that could alter lives in an instant. Daniel observed from a distance, his eyes narrowing slightly, noting the subtle gestures, the way people deferred to her naturally. He didn't intend to be noticed, but his posture and the quiet authority he carried did not go entirely unseen. There was a brief moment when their eyes met across the room. A flash of recognition, perhaps, or simply a shared understanding of unspoken experiences. Daniel looked away, focusing instead on keeping Lily entertained, careful not to draw further attention as the event progressed. Speeches were given, highlighting stories of bravery, service, and sacrifice. The hall echoed with applause, and Daniel felt a mixture of pride and discomfort. He wanted to celebrate the achievements of his fellow veterans, yet he preferred to remain invisible, avoiding the spotlight that had once been forced upon him by circumstances beyond his control. Lily clapped enthusiastically at the stories of courage, her innocence reminding Daniel of why he had endured so much. He watched her and felt a swell of emotion, realizing that her safety and happiness were his true missions now. During a brief break, Daniel stepped outside with Lily to get some fresh air. The sunlight felt warm against his face, a welcome contrast to the tension inside. He breathed deeply, allowing himself a moment of calm. Lily chattered happily about the decorations and the people she had seen, oblivious to the complexity of the life her father led. Daniel smiled at her energy, thinking how fortunate he was to have this bright, innocent perspective to anchor him. It was moments like these that reminded him that despite all the challenges, he was exactly where he needed to be. When they re-entered the hall, a conversation caught Daniel's attention. The SEAL Admiral was speaking with a small group of veterans, her tone light and humorous, teasing them about their old call signs. Daniel instinctively stiffened, a part of him automatically analyzing the situation. The mention of call signs brought back memories, each one tied to missions, identities, and decisions that had shaped him and others around him. He didn't participate, merely observing, careful to stay in the background. But the question lingered in the air, teasing and playful, yet charged with the weight of recognition among those who truly understood. Daniel moved closer to Lily, kneeling to adjust her jacket. He whispered something lighthearted to distract her, but his mind was partially elsewhere, replaying scenarios from years past, the code of conduct, the discipline that had guided him through danger. The room continued around him, filled with laughter, applause, and casual conversation. Yet Daniel's focus was inward, assessing, remembering, and preparing for the unexpected. Even in civilian life, even in a hall meant to honor and celebrate, the instincts developed over years of rigorous training remained sharp and ready. The afternoon continued with more speeches, photo opportunities, and casual interactions. Daniel remained in his quiet corner, yet occasionally glanced at the Admiral and the group she was speaking with. There was an energy about her, a presence that commanded respect without demanding it. Daniel appreciated such qualities, understanding that true leadership was measured by influence, not intimidation. Lily tugged at his hand, bringing him back to the present, and he smiled at her impatience, reminding himself that this day, like every other, was about her and the life he was building. not the echoes of missions long past dot as the event began to wind down. Daniel felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. He had participated in a gathering meant to honor veterans, kept his daughter close, and remained mostly unseen, but something told him that this afternoon might not end without an unexpected twist. He didn't know it yet, but a simple, casual question would soon challenge the careful balance he maintained between his past and present life. For now, he adjusted his jacket, held Lily's hand a little tighter, and prepared to navigate whatever came next, ready to remain the quiet, steady presence she needed above all else. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow across the event hall, and Daniel felt the weight of his decision to attend. He had managed to keep Lily entertained, yet the subtle tension in the room never fully left him. He observed the Admiral from across the floor, noticing her ease in commanding attention while still making small, personal gestures toward the veterans around her. Daniel's instincts, finely tuned from years in the Navy, noticed every detail, the way she tilted her head, the expressions she encouraged, the tone she used to put people at ease. Despite his desire to remain unnoticed, his attention was drawn to her, not out of curiosity, but from a shared understanding of the weight of leadership and responsibility. As the group of officers mingled, a light conversation began around them, filled with laughter and casual teasing. The Admiral, known for her sense of humor as much as her accomplishments, began asking playful questions to the veterans, trying to learn their old call signs. It was meant as a joke, a way to break the formality of the afternoon and make the environment more relaxed. Daniel tried to focus on Lily, kneeling to fix a strand of her hair, hoping to remain a background figure, invisible to the world around him. But then, a voice carried across the room, filled with playful curiosity, directed at him without knowing it. "So, what was your call sign back in the day?" The Admiral asked, smiling, with a tone that suggested light teasing. The question was casual, meant for humor, but Daniel's body reacted immediately. It was a question he had been asked countless times in various forms, some sincere, some teasing, some intrusive. Most people had no idea what it meant, and Daniel usually deflected, offering vague answers or changing the subject. Today, though, there was no one to deflect to. The eyes of the Admiral and a few senior officers, full of curiosity and expectation, were on him. He felt a twinge of nervousness, but it was not fear. It was awareness, the kind that came from having faced situations where a single word could have enormous consequences. Daniel hesitated, weighing his response carefully. His mind flashed to his missions, his team, and the countless operations that demanded secrecy and precision. The memories were vivid. The nights spent under the stars planning, the tension of knowing lives depended on every decision, the bond with his fellow operators who trusted him without question. He had never shared these details casually with anyone, and he certainly had no intention of broadcasting them in a crowded hall filled with people who did not understand the gravity behind them. Yet there was something in the Admiral's demeanor, a subtle recognition of the gravity behind the question, that made him reconsider. Perhaps, he thought, it was safe enough to answer, at least partially. He took a deep breath, steadying his voice, and spoke in a calm, clear tone that drew the attention of those nearby. "Viper 1, he said, his words deliberate, but without any flourish. The room paused. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, the air suddenly feeling heavier, as if the weight of the call sign carried history in it. Daniel immediately sensed the change, the subtle shift in the atmosphere that happens when someone realizes they are no longer just part of the crowd. The eyes of the Admiral widened slightly, her playful expression replaced with one of sharp recognition. She leaned back slightly, processing what had just been said, and the room felt suddenly charged with unspoken understanding. A few of the officers around her exchanged glances, brief nods that spoke volumes without words. The call sign was familiar to them, linked to missions that had become legendary within certain circles. It was not just a name. It was a symbol of leadership, courage, and precision under pressure. Daniel had always been careful to live quietly after leaving the Navy, avoiding recognition or attention. But in that moment, he realized that the past he had worked so hard to keep behind him had found its way back in the most unexpected way. The Admiral's tone changed, becoming serious, her eyes studying him intently. She asked a follow-up question, not in jest, but with genuine curiosity and a hint of awe. "Are you really Viper One?" Her voice held a mix of surprise and respect, a rare combination that made Daniel pause. He met her gaze, steady and composed, knowing that his answer would confirm what she already suspected. He nodded slowly, keeping his expression neutral, revealing nothing beyond the truth. The recognition in the room deepened, as if everyone around suddenly understood the weight carried by the man before them. Daniel noticed the subtle reactions of those nearby. Some shifted slightly in their seats, adjusting their posture as the significance of the moment settled in. Others whispered quietly, glances exchanged that carried acknowledgement and unspoken questions. The Admiral, maintaining her composure, allowed a brief moment of silence to pass, letting the revelation sink in without forcing it. She was a leader who knew how to read people and situations, and she understood that the impact of this simple answer would be felt more powerfully through observation than through words. He felt a mixture of emotions, though he kept his exterior calm. There was a sense of relief that he was recognized for who he truly was, yet there was also unease at being thrust into the spotlight he had avoided for so long. He glanced down at Lily, who was blissfully unaware of the tension in the room, happily adjusting her backpack. Her innocence provided a grounding force, a reminder that while the past had followed him here, it was her well-being and future that mattered most. Daniel took another deep breath, mentally preparing himself to navigate the next moments with the same composure he had relied on during his missions. The Admiral, now fully aware, leaned slightly forward, her expression a mix of astonishment and respect. She spoke again, this time with genuine admiration. "I've heard stories," she said quietly, as if acknowledging a shared understanding that only those who have experienced similar trials could grasp. Daniel listened, letting her words settle, recognizing that she was acknowledging both his achievements and the burdens he carried. It was rare to encounter someone who could offer respect without judgment, admiration without expectation. The surrounding officers maintained a respectful distance, sensing the gravity of the exchange. Daniel felt a subtle shift in the dynamic around him. Where he had entered the room as an ordinary attendee, he was now quietly acknowledged as someone whose experiences commanded respect. Yet he remained humble, aware that recognition did not change who he was or what he had endured. It was merely a reflection of the past, a momentary acknowledgement that did not define his present or future. The atmosphere remained charged, conversations hushed, and glances exchanged. Daniel noticed a few younger veterans nearby observing him closely, their expressions a mix of curiosity and admiration. They had seen the respect in the Admiral's eyes and understood that the man before them was someone extraordinary, someone whose quiet demeanor masked a lifetime of service and sacrifice. He felt a sense of responsibility, not for their admiration, but for the example he might provide. Leadership, he realized, was not about being recognized publicly. It was about maintaining integrity, composure, and humility, even when recognition arrived unexpectedly. As the event continued, Daniel found himself drawn into brief conversations, careful to remain measured and composed. He shared small anecdotes, carefully avoiding sensitive details, and focused on encouragement and support for other veterans. Lily remained by his side, cheerful and energetic, unknowingly softening the edges of the tension around him. Daniel realized that despite the unexpected turn of events, the day was still his to navigate. and he was determined to do so with the same calm and steadiness that had guided him through countless missions in the past. By the time the afternoon was winding down, Daniel could feel the subtle change in the room. The respect of the officers, the curiosity of other veterans, and the quiet acknowledgement from the Admiral had created a new dynamic. He was no longer just a background figure. He was recognized as someone whose experiences carried weight and meaning. Yet he remained grounded, focusing on Lily, the reason he had endured so much, and the reason he would continue to face challenges with unwavering resolve. As they prepared to leave, the Admiral approached him briefly, her tone softened. She offered a nod of respect, acknowledging the man he was without words that could diminish his humility. Daniel returned the gesture, a quiet understanding passing between them. It was a moment of recognition, not fanfare, a subtle acknowledgement of shared values, of sacrifice, and of unspoken courage. Daniel realized that sometimes recognition arrived in the most unexpected ways, not through ceremonies or accolades, but through a simple question, a name spoken, and the understanding that followed. Walking out of the hall with Lily's hand in his, Daniel felt a mixture of relief and quiet pride. The afternoon had taken an unexpected turn, revealing layers of his past he had carefully kept hidden. Yet he had navigated it with composure, maintaining the integrity and humility that defined him. He glanced down at Lily, her laughter bright and carefree, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. The day had reminded him that while the past would always be a part of him, it was the present, the life he was building with his daughter, that truly mattered. And for now, that was enough. The hall was quieter now, but the atmosphere felt charged in a way that Daniel had not expected. The words he had spoken, the simple call sign, had shifted the energy in the room. People who had barely noticed him before were now exchanging subtle glances, some curious, some impressed. Daniel felt a mix of emotions, but he kept his composure, keeping his focus on Lily as she tugged at his hand, her innocent energy pulling him back to the present. He wanted to enjoy the rest of the event with her, but he also understood that the moment had changed, how others saw him. The Admiral had taken a step back, but her eyes remained fixed on him, as if silently processing the significance of his presence. Daniel knew that she understood far more than the casual observer would. There were stories, unspoken histories, and missions that few knew about, and the weight of those experiences was carried in the name he had spoken. He had led teams, made life-and-death decisions, and survived situations that left lasting impressions on everyone involved. All of that remained hidden under the quiet exterior he presented now. A junior officer approached him cautiously, unsure of how to interact. "Sir," the young man began, hesitating slightly, "it's an honor to meet you. I've heard stories." His words were careful, respectful, aware that he was speaking to someone with a reputation that carried weight. Daniel nodded politely, acknowledging the young officer without giving anything away. He had learned long ago to speak little and listen much, to let actions and history speak for themselves rather than rely on words. Meanwhile, Lily continued to explore the area near her father, fascinated by the displays of equipment and decorations. Daniel kept a close eye on her, adjusting her jacket and making small comments to guide her safely. He found comfort in her presence, in the normalcy of her curiosity and playfulness. No matter how extraordinary the attention around him became, she reminded him of the life he had chosen, a life defined by care, protection, and quiet dedication. Rather than public recognition or past achievements, the Admiral finally approached him directly, moving with the calm confidence that had marked her leadership throughout her career. She spoke in a measured tone, her voice quiet but firm. "I didn't expect this," she admitted, a faint smile playing at the edges of her mouth. "Viper 1. I thought that name was history, something out of stories." I didn't think I'd meet the man behind it today. Daniel felt the subtle shift in the conversation. Her words carried respect, curiosity, and a recognition of the experiences that had shaped him. He nodded slowly, responding with calm humility. "It's been a long time," he said simply. "I don't usually talk about it." The Admiral's expression softened, and she looked around at the officers and veterans nearby, who had now noticed the interaction. She gestured subtly, allowing them to understand without speaking aloud. Daniel realized that this acknowledgement was more than just curiosity. It was recognition of the sacrifices and leadership he had demonstrated, the moments where he had been tested beyond ordinary measure. For a brief moment, he felt a strange sense of relief. To be recognized, even subtly, without fanfare or expectation, was rare and meaningful. Despite the attention, Daniel remained focused on maintaining his composure. He was aware that some people were curious about the stories behind the name, but he had learned to balance respect for his past with discretion. The tales of missions, the strategies, the risks, and the decisions were not for public consumption. Only those who had shared similar experiences could truly understand the weight and consequences. He had survived, but he had also carried the memories and the responsibility for the people he had led. Those truths remained with him, and he would reveal them only to those who could understand without judgment. The Admiral leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice so that it was nearly a whisper. "Your team. They must have trusted you completely." Her words were simple, yet they carried an understanding that went beyond what was spoken. Daniel felt a flicker of memory, the bond with his fellow operators, the reliance on one another in situations that demanded absolute trust. He nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of the camaraderie and responsibility that had defined those years. As the event continued, other veterans and attendees approached cautiously, seeking acknowledgement or offering quiet congratulations. Daniel accepted them with modesty, careful not to dwell on his past, yet allowing the recognition to exist without diminishing it. He realized that the afternoon had become a delicate balance between his private life and the public acknowledgement of his past service. Maintaining that balance required attentiveness, patience, and humility, the very qualities that had guided him through missions and had now shaped his interaction in a civilian space. Meanwhile, Lily's laughter drew him back to the present repeatedly. She had found a small display of model helicopters and was examining them with fascination. Daniel knelt beside her, explaining a few simple details and asking her questions about what she saw. In these moments, he felt a sense of grounding, a reminder that no matter how extraordinary the attention he received might be, his primary responsibility was to her. The world could recognize him, respect him, or celebrate him, but he had to remain the steady, protective presence she needed above all else. A reporter, sensing the shift in the room, approached cautiously, not realizing the significance of the man before them. Daniel politely declined an interview, explaining that he preferred to keep the focus on other veterans and the purpose of the event. The reporter accepted the response, noting the quiet dignity in his demeanor. It was a small but meaningful choice. Daniel had learned that recognition could be managed without compromising his values or exposing himself unnecessarily. His past achievements were a part of him, but they did not define the entirety of who he was now. The Admiral, observing the interactions, seemed to appreciate the balance Daniel maintained. She nodded subtly, conveying approval without words, and returned to her duties. Daniel felt a sense of relief, knowing that the recognition had not disrupted the purpose of the gathering. The afternoon continued, filled with speeches, handshakes, and polite conversations, yet a quiet respect lingered around him. It was a recognition of the extraordinary beneath the ordinary, a subtle acknowledgement that not all heroes wear medals publicly or seek applause. As the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the hall, Daniel prepared to leave. He collected Lily's belongings, checking her backpack and ensuring she had everything she needed. The Admiral approached one last time, offering a nod that spoke volumes. Daniel returned the gesture, silently acknowledging the mutual understanding of service, sacrifice, and responsibility. There was no need for words. The recognition was complete, conveyed through shared respect and subtle acknowledgement. Walking toward the exit, Daniel reflected on the afternoon. He had navigated the delicate balance between recognition and discretion, acknowledging his past without allowing it to dominate his present. The interactions had reminded him that while his history carried weight, his focus remained on building a life with Lily, protecting her, and providing her with stability and love. The past would always be a part of him, but it was the present, and the life he was shaping for his daughter, that truly mattered. Outside, the air was cool and fresh. Daniel took a deep breath, letting the weight of the day settle. Lily skipped ahead, laughing at a small butterfly that danced near her path. He followed, a quiet smile on his face, feeling the balance he had long sought between past and present. The recognition he had received was meaningful, yet it did not define him. What mattered most was the quiet, steady life he was building with his daughter. A life filled with love, guidance, and unwavering care. As they walked to the car, Daniel's thoughts wandered briefly to the missions and the team members he had lost, the experiences that had shaped him, and the skills he had learned. He understood that those lessons continued to guide him even now in civilian life. Leadership, composure, and humility were not confined to battlefields. They were essential in raising a child, navigating challenges, and living with integrity. He felt grateful for the reminder, knowing that his past, while extraordinary, served as a foundation for the life he now cherished. Finally, as they drove home, Daniel glanced at Lily in the rearview mirror, her eyes bright and filled with curiosity about the day. He smiled quietly, feeling a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with recognition or applause. The day had reinforced the values he held most dear: protection, care, and presence. It had also subtly reminded him that the world could recognize courage and service in unexpected ways. Yet the truest measure of success was how he lived and guided the life of his daughter. In that quiet, reflective moment, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to continue navigating the challenges of life with steadfast commitment, humility, and unwavering dedication. The day was slowly drawing to an end, but the tension in Daniel's mind hadn't lifted. While he had managed to stay composed, the exchange earlier with the Admiral still lingered in his thoughts. The room had subtly changed around him, and he knew that curiosity about the man called Vepr 1 had spread. People were looking at him with quiet acknowledgement, and some with a mix of curiosity and admiration. It was not something he sought, but he had learned long ago that once a person's actions spoke louder than words, recognition would find its way. The Admiral had returned to her position at the front of the hall, engaging with others, but her gaze occasionally drifted back toward him. Daniel could feel the weight of her attention, not intrusive, but perceptive and analytical. It was clear she was not only processing what she had just discovered, but also considering the implications. She had met many veterans in her time, but there was something in Daniel's presence, in the way he carried himself, that spoke volumes without a single boastful word. That quiet confidence was familiar to her, the kind that comes from experience, discipline, and deep personal sacrifice. Daniel's mind drifted briefly back to his time in the Navy. Memories surfaced of high-stakes missions, planning late into the night with only maps and whispers, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him constantly. He remembered the faces of his team, the camaraderie that was forged in life-and-death situations, and the difficult choices that had been necessary to succeed and survive. Every operation left a mark, and every decision weighed heavily on his conscience. The call sign Viper 1 carried that history, but only those who had lived similar, experiences could truly understand the depth behind it. A young veteran approached him cautiously, hesitating before speaking. I didn't know you were here today. I've heard stories. Is it really true? The young man's voice was tentative, respectful, as if stepping carefully into sacred ground. Daniel looked at him and gave a small nod. He didn't need to confirm everything, but the acknowledgement was enough to convey understanding. The young veteran's eyes lit up with a mixture of admiration and disbelief, and Daniel felt a subtle sense of responsibility. The weight of being recognized meant that he had to continue to exemplify the principles that had guided him: discipline, humility, and quiet strength. The Admiral stepped forward, approaching Daniel once more. This time, her expression was more serious, her voice measured. I've looked into it, she said quietly, ensuring that her words would not carry beyond their conversation. Viper 1. It's all true. The missions, the leadership, the decisions you made. I can't imagine the weight of that responsibility. Daniel listened, his face calm, but inside, a mix of emotions stirred. It was rare to find someone who could acknowledge the reality of his past without embellishment or misunderstanding. She understood that leadership was more than titles or medals. It was measured in the choices made when no one is watching, and the lives that depend on them. Daniel nodded slightly. It was my team. I was just part of it. We all relied on each other. We did what we had to do. His voice was steady, but the memories that accompanied the words were vivid and intense. The Admiral listened closely, absorbing the significance of his humility. She had seen many people take credit for actions they did not fully understand or had not lived through. Daniel's calm acceptance of responsibility, his acknowledgement of his team rather than self-aggrandizement, spoke volumes about the man he was. There was a quiet moment between them, a shared understanding that did not require further words. The Admiral's eyes conveyed respect, recognition, and perhaps a hint of awe. She knew that the man standing before her had experienced more than most could imagine, and he carried it with quiet dignity. Daniel felt a strange sense of relief. The weight of secrecy and unspoken history was being acknowledged by someone who could truly understand. It was not the public recognition he had avoided all these years, but a deeper, more meaningful validation that resonated with him profoundly. Around them, the atmosphere had subtly shifted. People who had once regarded Daniel as just another attendee were now observing with quiet curiosity. Some were veterans themselves, sensing the weight behind the call sign. Others were civilians, unaware of the specifics, but perceiving that the man before them had a presence that demanded respect. Daniel remained humble, focused on Lily, who was happily exploring nearby displays. Her innocence and energy provided balance, reminding him that while the past was significant, the present and the life he was nurturing were paramount. The Admiral continued to speak softly, her words deliberate. You made choices that saved lives, not just in operations, but in guiding your team. That is leadership. That is courage. Daniel nodded, acknowledging the truth without ego. It was not praise he sought, but understanding, and in her quiet acknowledgement, he found a measure of peace. The recognition did not change who he was, but it validated the experiences that had shaped him and the principles that continued to guide his life. A few other officers approached, cautiously joining the conversation. Their questions were respectful, aimed at understanding rather than probing for sensational details. Daniel answered with brevity and clarity, providing context where necessary, but never revealing operational specifics. His focus was always on the human side, the teamwork, the trust, the decisions that impacted lives. It was a reminder that heroism is often quiet, measured, and defined by actions rather than words. As the afternoon wore on, the conversation turned to the impact of past experiences on current life. Daniel spoke about the challenges of adjusting to civilian life, the quiet struggles of raising a child alone, and the importance of humility and focus. The Admiral listened intently, offering insights drawn from her own experiences in leadership and responsibility. It was a moment of genuine human connection, bridging the gap between past and present, military and civilian. Recognition and humility. Daniel felt the subtle relief of finally being understood in a way he rarely experienced. The Admiral's acknowledgement and the careful attention of those around him created an atmosphere of respect without spectacle. It was validation without fanfare, recognition without intrusion. He could feel the tension that had accompanied the question of his call sign dissipating, replaced by a quiet understanding that allowed him to focus on the present while acknowledging the significance of the past. Lily tugged at his hand, reminding him that the day was not just about recognition or past achievements, but about her. He knelt to adjust her jacket and smiled, feeling the grounding influence of her presence. No matter how extraordinary the attention or the acknowledgement, she remained his center, his purpose, and his motivation. The balance between past and present, between recognition and humility, was maintained through his commitment to her well-being. As the event drew to a close, the Admiral offered a final quiet nod of respect. Daniel returned it, understanding the depth of unspoken communication between them. There was no need for grand gestures or public declarations. The acknowledgement was complete in its subtlety. Daniel had been recognized not for vanity, but for leadership, integrity, and quiet heroism. It was a rare form of respect, one that resonated more deeply than any public accolade could. Walking toward the exit with Lily, Daniel reflected on the afternoon. The exchange with the Admiral and the subtle acknowledgement from others had reminded him of the values he had lived by: discipline, humility, courage, and responsibility. These values had guided him through life and death decisions in the past, and now guided him in raising his daughter, navigating civilian life, and maintaining his quiet dignity. The past had been acknowledged, yet it did not define his present. It informed it, shaped it, and reinforced his commitment to what truly mattered. Outside, the cool air of the early evening was refreshing. Daniel took a deep breath, letting the day's events settle into perspective. Lily skipped ahead, her laughter filling the quiet streets, a reminder of the simple joys that grounded him. He followed, a quiet sense of fulfillment settling over him. The recognition he had received was meaningful, but it did not change who he was or what he valued. What mattered most was the life he was building, the lessons he was teaching, and the love and guidance he provided to his daughter as they reached their car. Daniel glanced at Lily in the rear-view mirror, her eyes bright and full of curiosity about the day's experiences. He smiled quietly, understanding that while the past would always be a part of him, it was the present and the future that defined his role now. The day had brought unexpected recognition and subtle validation, yet it had also reinforced his priorities, grounding him in the human connections and responsibilities that mattered most. Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to continue navigating life with humility, integrity, and unwavering dedication to his daughter and the values that had guided him through every chapter of his extraordinary journey. Daniel parked the car outside their small apartment, the evening sky painted in shades of orange and pink. Lily was still chattering about the event, her small hands clasped around a small toy she had picked up, a souvenir from one of the displays. Daniel smiled, listening to her excitement, grateful for these moments of normalcy amidst the unexpected attention he had received that afternoon. The recognition from the Admiral and the subtle acknowledgement from others still lingered in his mind. But he reminded himself that his life and responsibilities remained centered on Lily as they entered the apartment. Daniel set her backpack down and knelt to help her take off her coat. He asked gently about her favorite part of the day, and she excitedly described the model helicopters, the flags, and the stories about veterans she had overheard. Her curiosity was pure and innocent, and Daniel cherished it, knowing that these memories would become part of her childhood. He responded with gentle questions, encouraging her storytelling, careful to keep her imagination active, while also providing guidance and support. It was in these quiet domestic moments that he felt his purpose most clearly, balancing the extraordinary past with the ordinary, present out after Lily settled in with a drawing she had started on the floor. Daniel sat at the small kitchen table, reflecting on the day. The recognition he had received had been unexpected, and it carried with it a mixture of emotions, pride, humility, and a quiet sense of validation. He had spent years living in the shadows, keeping his past experiences private, and now, in a moment of casual questioning, the world had briefly acknowledged the reality of his service. Yet he knew that this acknowledgement did not define him. It was a momentary reflection of the life he had led, a small window into the sacrifices and decisions that had shaped him. Later that evening, as Lily was tucked into bed, Daniel lingered in the doorway, watching her breathe softly and sleep. The weight of responsibility that had guided him through countless missions now felt different, lighter in some ways, yet profound in others. He had navigated high-stakes situations where every decision could mean life or death, and now he faced the delicate, everyday responsibilities of nurturing and guiding a young life. The comparison was striking. Both required patience, presence, and unwavering commitment. He quietly closed the door, leaving her in the safety of her dreams, and returned to the living room to reflect further. Daniel's thoughts drifted back to the Admiral and the brief yet meaningful exchange they had shared. Her recognition had been subtle, yet it carried the weight of understanding and respect. She had acknowledged the depth of his experiences without judgment or spectacle. That kind of validation was rare and deeply meaningful, reminding him that not all recognition needs to be loud to be significant. In that acknowledgement, he saw a reflection of the principles he had lived by: humility, responsibility, and steadfast leadership. These principles had guided him through his past, and now guided him in the quiet, sometimes unseen, work of raising his daughter. He thought about the other veterans and attendees who had approached him during the event, their eyes filled with curiosity and quiet admiration. He had answered their questions with calm honesty, focusing on the human aspects of service, the trust, the teamwork, and the decisions that impacted lives. It was a reminder that heroism often exists in subtle forms, in everyday actions and in the quiet acknowledgement of responsibility. The event had been a small stage for that heroism to be recognized, yet it was the continuous, private acts of care and dedication that truly defined him. As he sipped a cup of tea, Daniel considered the lessons he wanted to impart to Lily. He realized that the day's events had provided an opportunity to reinforce the values he held most dear: courage, humility, integrity, and resilience. He knew that he could not shield her from all challenges, but he could provide her with a model of how to face difficulties with grace and strength. The Admiral's subtle acknowledgement had highlighted the importance of these qualities, and Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose in embodying them fully for his daughter. Later, Daniel stepped outside onto the small balcony of their apartment, looking at the city lights twinkling in the distance. The quiet hum of the evening offered a moment of reflection. He thought about the missions that had defined his past, the decisions that had shaped his life, and the responsibilities that had carried him through both triumphs and losses. He felt a quiet gratitude for the acknowledgement he had received, but he also recognized that it was the ongoing commitment to his daughter's well-being and their shared life that mattered most. The past had shaped him, yes, but it was the present and future that truly defined his purpose. He heard Lily's soft laughter from inside, and it reminded him of the simple joys that grounded him. The day had been extraordinary in its recognition, yet ordinary in its responsibilities, and both aspects were equally important. Daniel knew that raising Lily would continue to require patience, resilience, and unwavering dedication. He also knew that the acknowledgement of his past could now serve as a quiet reminder that his experiences, while extraordinary, had prepared him for the ongoing challenges of life and fatherhood. As night deepened, Daniel and Lily shared a small dinner, talking about their plans for the week ahead and the stories that had captivated her during the event. He listened attentively, offering guidance and encouragement, reinforcing her curiosity and sense of wonder. These moments, filled with ordinary conversation and shared laughter, held profound significance for Daniel. They represented the steady, dependable presence he sought to provide, the continuity and care that would shape Lily's life in meaningful ways. After dinner, Daniel helped Lily prepare for bed once more, reading a short story and tucking her in with gentle reassurances. As he left her room, he paused, reflecting on how much the day had taught him about balance. Recognition and acknowledgement could come and go, but the lasting impact lay in the steady, consistent efforts he made to guide and nurture her. The values of courage, integrity, and humility were not abstract concepts, they were lived experiences, demonstrated daily in the way he protected, guided, and encouraged her. Daniel spent the remainder of the evening reviewing plans for the week ahead, ensuring that he could balance work, responsibilities, and moments of shared time with Lily. He understood that life would continue to present challenges, some expected and others unforeseen. Yet he felt confident that the experiences of his past, combined with the lessons of the day, had equipped him to handle them with composure, insight, and unwavering dedication. The recognition he had received was a fleeting moment, but the values and principles it reinforced would remain enduring guides. As he finally settled into bed, Daniel reflected once more on the significance of the afternoon. The Admiral's acknowledgement had been unexpected, and yet it had reinforced his understanding of leadership, responsibility, and humility. He thought about the quiet moments, the shared glances, and the subtle exchanges that conveyed respect without fanfare. These were the moments that mattered, shaping his sense of purpose and reinforcing his commitment to the principles that had guided him through both extraordinary and ordinary experiences. He drifted into sleep with a sense of calm satisfaction, knowing that he had navigated the day with composure and integrity. The recognition of the past was meaningful, but it did not define him. His life was defined by the choices he made daily, the presence he offered, and the love he provided to his daughter. The balance between extraordinary past and ordinary present was delicate, yet he had maintained it, understanding that true leadership and heroism are often measured in quiet, consistent actions rather than public acknowledgement. Morning arrived, with the soft light filtering through the curtains. Daniel awoke to the familiar sounds of Lily stirring in her room. He smiled, preparing for another day filled with ordinary challenges and extraordinary responsibilities. The events of the previous day lingered in his mind, but they no longer carried tension. They were a reminder of the life he had led, the recognition he had earned, and the ongoing commitment to his daughter's well-being. Each day presented new opportunities to demonstrate courage, humility, and steadfast dedication, and Daniel was ready to meet them with unwavering resolve. As he helped Lily get ready for the day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The acknowledgement he had received from the Admiral and the subtle respect of others had reinforced the values he held most dear. Yet it was the daily acts of care, guidance, and presence that truly defined his life and legacy. He walked with her to school, hand in hand, feeling the quiet strength of their bond and the enduring significance of the lessons both had learned. The past had shaped him, but it was the present, lived with integrity and love, that defined his future.